Welcome to the hottest real estate topics on the planet, keeping you up to date with all the creative ways to buy and sell real estate without bank qualifying, so anyone can build real income starting today. Here is another great show with Dealmaker Bill and Pete the Rookie.
All right, here we are at another episode of Flipping Houses for Rookies. Yay.
Zoom, zoom.
That didn't sound very cheerful, did it?
Oh, well, you don't want to overdo it.
My friend goes, boom, boom.
Oh, yeah.
Like done. Boom, boom.
Who does that?
One of the supervisors where I'm at.
Oh, okay.
Anyways, so we're on podcast number 398. 398. And here's the title of today's podcast. You ready?
Yes.
So just in case you're curious, this is a fly ball.
Wait a minute. A fly ball. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, you know how when you pitch it.
Oh, baseball.
And the batter just doesn't try to swing. He just kind of hits it, kind of like out of the ordinary.
You mean a bunt?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, bunt.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. A bunt. Okay.
All right. I know a little bit about baseball. A little bit.
Anyways, here's the title.
Yeah.
Undervalued property versus overvalued property. Which makes more profit in real estate?
Okay.
Undervalued property versus overvalued property. Which makes more profit in real estate? Here is the description. Are you getting fed up with everyone telling you to go find undervalued property in a completely bloated market? Let's face it, those bargain bin properties are becoming time vampires and wallet draining for most. If you want to forget the low ball offer game and step into today's best way to profit from overvalued property, this episode will shock you with pure math and a little seller greed phenomenon. Tune in so you can see how to crush your competition without any tricks, sales techniques, or hard paperwork. In fact, overpaying for property is actually the safest way you can do deals and make $3,000, $5,000, $10,000, or more, usually in about 30 days from starting. This ain't your daddy's or granddaddy's fixer-up strategy. That is for the folks that want to work part-time. I'm going to give that to you again. This is for the folks that want to work part-time and slam down a full-time paycheck just for knowing a few little dirty secrets unleashed in this single podcast. This is a no-holds-bar ride. Ditch what you think you know about real estate profits and study this episode to start living large with less work and no risk.
Okay.
Huh.
When I turned my phone on this morning, I threw YouTube on, and I saw the beginning of the podcast announced, Undervalued, and I had to run. So,
Oh, you cheated.
I wasn't trying to, but we're infamous. So we show up when I go through my own social media, like, oh, there I am, Bill. There we go. So now I understand where you're going with this. I get it.
Cool. Yeah. All right. So start off with the housekeeping type activities. So first of all, we are a podcast about flipping houses, but it's flipping pretty houses usually. That's what it's become. It didn't start that way, but it's become that way, right? We record this podcast every Thursday morning around 9:30 a.m.-ish Eastern Standard Time. If you want to be part of the podcast or if you want to ask any questions or put any comments, you can go to, because we stream it on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. I never say this part, Peter, but we syndicate it and it goes on the podcast platforms on Monday. I always forget to say that part. Right? So we stream it live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. But my staff or my crew, my daughter actually, syndicates it on Sunday. So Monday it is on the podcast platforms. Okay? If you have any comments or want to say anything, just go to any one of those platforms. Wherever you could type something in, you could type it in, and I will get it on my computer, and we will answer it. Make sure if you have questions about the podcast, I will pay attention to them. If it's not about the podcast, please send that communication to flippinghousesforrookies.com. Top right-hand side is a support ticket, or you can go to WhatsApp Messenger and look for Let's Talk Real Estate. And there's about 100 and something people in there. And Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich says that it's good to have a mastermind group, and that is a mastermind group you can get in for free. Okay? Last thing is, make sure you like us, make sure you subscribe to us, and make sure you leave us a comment. And there you go.
Thank you.
Here we go. Ready to start?
Ready to go.
Is wholesaling really dead? First of all, what does wholesaling actually mean? I've always been confused about this. This is a very confusing thing. Ever since I heard it like 30 years ago or 25 years ago, my first seminar, I was like, what is wholesaling? What is it? Wholesaling? What does that mean?
Yeah.
So the definition of wholesaling, because I looked it up, the definition of wholesaling is a wholesale purchase is almost always made in bulk. And because of that, you pay a discount price for the purchase. Like, for example, Walmart buys wholesale. In other words, they buy truckloads or trainloads of they probably buy trainloads of
boatloads,
stock, right? Yeah, so let's say it's a baseball bat.
Sure.
So they'll buy it wholesale, but then they'll sell it retail, and retail means selling one at a time.
Sure.
So wholesale is buying bulk, and retail is selling or buying or whatever one at a time. So does this mean that your seller has many houses, and you're going to buy them in bulk and get a discount?
No.
Does this mean that we can go to Home Depot and we can order, 15 houses?
Maybe sheds.
I tried to do this. I went to the contractor desk and I said, I'm here to buy 4 houses.
Yeah.
And the girl looked at me and said, isn't this Home Depot? And she looked at me. She goes, Bill. Yeah, I get it. My humor's not good this morning.
Yep. Hey, you tried.
Right?
You tried.
Yeah, I want to buy them in bulk. I would like to do that. Who wouldn't like to do that?
Yeah, you buy the whole thing. Wholesale, buy the whole thing. Sure.
Right? Wholesale would be buying or purchasing or buying in bulk. So why do we call this wholesaling? I don't get it. So all of this bill talk or bill think, okay, ends up with begs the question, why should the seller give us a discount?
Right.
So hang on one second. There's somebody in here.
Yeah. Because people who do wholesaling are looking for a house that they can get for a really good price and then just turn on and sell it. Let's see.
I think this is Chris from one of my other coaching groups. I think he's from Joe's group.
Oh, yeah?
Hey, Bill and Pete, I usually listen to iHeartRadio. I'm a machinist, so I have a hard time watching these live. I've been following since about episode 372, I think. I subscribe on Facebook and iHeartRadio. And then his second message is, you could in the Sears pen.
Yeah, they would sell a house. Would come on a train and you put it together.
Good point, Chris.
I did a shed that way, but a whole house? Oh, boy.
My old man did that.
Yeah.
Jess, well, my stepdad,
Yeah.
or godfather, he was really my godfather.
Yeah.
He did that. He bought a house. He bought a house, and I don't know. I don't even know the year. And they delivered it on a truck, and he built it.
Well,
It was like
they'll still do that with log homes.
yeah.
But they come out pretty fancy because you do all the inside nice and all that. By the way, speaking of wholesale, what you said at the very beginning, like, wholesale deals are far and few between. Well, I ran into a wholesaler last year, and once in a while he calls me with something, and it's not a deal. But he called me the other day. He said, Pete, can you refer me to a lawyer who can do subject to deal? So I gave him one of my attorneys, and then he called me back later to ask, can I bother you with a couple of questions? Sure, just do this, do that, because he didn't know how to handle it. But he's a wholesaler, and he can wholesale. So he's looking how to do creative financing. And that's the point that you said a few minutes ago. So that happened yesterday.
Is wholesaling really dead?
Yeah, this guy...
I have an answer, but I'm not going to give it to you. Let's talk about it throughout the podcast. That's what we're going to talk about. Is it really dead?
Yeah, well, that's what happened with this guy.
Well, what would make wholesaling dead, Peter?
Well, if you can't buy...
2 words.
Huh?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, we'll synthesize it down, but if you can't buy a house cheap enough, you can't sell it and make a profit. So what's the 2 words that say that?
No deals.
Yeah, no deals. Yeah, who's going to sell you a house for cheap? Like, why should I sell you a house for cheap?
Which begs the question, why should the seller give you a discount? Why? Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that. Because you can close quickly. That used to be the reason why. Well, since COVID and the government putting about $10 trillion back into the economy by printing
Checks.
In other words, you think the speed limit at 70 miles an hour is fast? You ought to see those printing presses going, printing $100 bills, right? So I don't understand because I watch way too much political news. My wife kind of gives me a hard time, and I have a few of my friends, and my direct answer is this. I'm not a news guy. I don't believe in the news. I think the news, if you read the history of newspapers, which I have, newspapers were designed to generate attention so ads could be sold. Mm-hmm. Because back in the 1800s, I forgot the guy's name, but he figured out the only way to make money with newspapers is not to sell them for 5 cents, but to sell the ads inside the newspaper. So everybody else is selling newspapers for 10 cents. He was selling them for 5 cents, and he was crushing it because everybody, the business guys, or not everybody, but a lot of business guys were giving him ad money because he had a circulation of whatever the number was.
Sure.
Right? And back then it was easy to do because circulation meant how many people were giving him 5 cents. Mm-hmm. Right? So the news, actually anything, my mother called me one time and she said to me, did you see blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, Mom, are you for real? She goes, what? I said, where'd you get that information? She goes, on TV. I said, what is TV all about? Like, what makes TV? Like, the show you're watching, how's it generated? And eventually she goes, with actors and actresses. Perfect. So they're all scripted. They say what somebody else wants them to say. So even the news is that way.
Yep.
Anyways, I'm off on a tangent. The reason why I watch the political news is because I actually believe, and I know you do too because I probably got this from you, is I actually believe that there is a slight, very slight, very, very slight possibility that suppression in the government is going to get blown up. I don't know why I believe that, but I believe that all the bad guys are going to get caught and get put in jail. And it's a far stretch. But I think out of all of time and all of history, all the way back to the Roman Empire, right? Mm-hmm. The perfect storm has not been in place for this to happen, and it is right now, especially with this election. Mm-hmm. So that's why I watch it. Okay?
Sure.
So why am I talking about this? Let me see here.
Well, the news, and it's entertaining, and you watch the news. You watch the news
why am I telling you that?
you watch the news to see what's happening, or actually, I like to see what's happening because I want to know what people are feeling or what they're believing, and what their acceptance level is, their confidence level, if they're scared, if they feel safe to sell a house, they don't want to sell the house, how they feel, because that's how they're being told to believe, and people will buy into that, and then I know what I'm kind of trying to deal with the general public.
Right. So I know I was telling you this now.
Okay.
Because I was talking about COVID.
Yeah, and all the money pumped in.
And what happened is COVID. So this is inflation. Too much money, not enough products.
Right.
AKA 20 buyers that can pay cash and one house for sale. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen to that price of that house?
People, it's like an auction. People keep going up and up and up and up, bidding up.
So think about what happened in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
They printed money, so there was more money, and people were home not producing. You couldn't buy couches, you couldn't buy refrigerators, you couldn't buy cars, you couldn't buy beds, you couldn't buy, food barely.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, the shelves were bare.
Toilet paper was, it hit the supply chain and it dried it up.
Yeah.
And it has taken us years to recover from that, right? Mm-hmm. Including real estate. And I think we are about at a point where that is starting to level out. Mm-hmm. Now, on top of all of that, and then I'm gonna carry on because this is not part of my podcast, but this is how I feel. Part of that is NAR, the National Association of Realtors. If you go back several podcasts, I don't have my book here, so I can't tell you what number, but we talked about NAR getting sued. In October 31st, 2023, there was a judgment, I think in Missouri or Mississippi or something like that, a southern state, where there was 250,000 homeowners that sued the National Association of Realtors for having two commissions and racketeering. The racketeering part was, which they won for $1.78 billion. I'm sure they're appealing it. they haven't collected. Nobody's collecting any money. But the point is that it started once they start with something like that. Mm-hmm. And the reason why they're getting sued for racketeering is because the National Association of Realtors owns a company called Value.com. And Value.com, or Value Inc., or whatever it is, actually has shares in all of the websites. Realtor.com. They don't have any shares in Zillow, although it has been found that they do. But Realtor.com, Redfin, Trulia, so there's a half a dozen of these websites that they actually own shares, a majority shares in. Mm. And they keep the prices of real estate high with those comps. And the reason why they're keeping the real estate prices high with those comps is because they get commission on the price they sell for. Mm-hmm. Now, none of that will work unless the banks will lend money on it. So now with all this money flying around, right? All this money flying around, because the only way that I know that the government can actually get the money from the printing presses into circulation is through Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, FHA, with mortgages and college loans. Believe it or not, the government's the biggest profit center in the government is college loans, because you can't bankrupt them. You can't get rid of them. You have to just pay them. There's no way to get rid of them. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's their biggest loan. Yep. So my point in bringing all this up at this particular point is, if you have all of that going on, in other words, the government has too much money and they're trying to get it circulated, so they're giving loans, right? Prices of houses are staying up because National Association of Realtors wants them to stay up so their commissions can stay high. Mm-hmm. And you have more than 3% appreciation. If you look back 100 years, appreciation averages about 3%. Well, the last couple of years, it's been way more than 3%.
No, it's been nuts.
So if you stand still long enough, right, the price of the house go up. So why would somebody want to sell on a discount? That's my question.
Exactly.
Right? Because you can sell quickly. Well, since COVID, and the government putting all this money in, right? You could sell quickly without selling for a discount.
Mm-hmm.
You can sell quickly on an overpriced property.
Yep.
So maybe back in the 70s, that worked for my dad or my granddad, but not in today's environment, right? Totally different. I'm going to tell you, point blank, I've done real estate for 30 years and done hundreds and hundreds of deals. And I have to tell you that I can't remember the name of the show. I can't even remember the name of the actor. I can't even do this. Maybe I can't do this.
It's a regular show?
No, it's a movie
Uh-huh.
where the guy wakes up every morning and the girl has amnesia and he has to tell her.
I know that one. That's Adam
Yeah.
Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore, 50 Dates.
Yeah. 50 dates.
50
There you go.
50 first dates.
First dates.
Because every day's new for her.
So that's what I felt like in 2020.
Yeah?
All my experience didn't matter.
Yeah.
Because it was like I walked in, I went through like, one of those, sci-fi movies. You walk through a wall or something like that.
You go into the mirror. You went through a mirror, Bill.
Yeah, and you go into another world, like Alice in Wonderland down the chute,
Yeah.
It was like, what the hell just happened? Just like that, just like that. And people are like, oh, the bubble's going to break. Well, bubble my ass. It was in 2020, right? Maybe, moving on, maybe you think the seller gave you a discount because it needs repairs. House needs repairs.
Yeah.
And the realtor doesn't have enough rehabbers with cash to make a bidding war. So maybe the seller will give you a discount because of that.
Mm.
Right? Well, again, since COVID, about 40%. I don't ever hear anybody talking about this number. About 40% of the market is being sold without the realtor.
Yep.
Or directly from seller to buyer.
Mm.
And often without banks.
Wait a minute. Not even the bank? Mortgage?
Well, I don't think 40% of them are, but often, I said often without banks. Yeah, because a lot of people, I know in Connecticut, we're obviously a neighboring state of New York. And regardless of what the news says, I know if you don't watch some Republican news once in a while, I watch both because I want to hear what's going on. Mm-hmm. And the only Republican channel I know of, unless you go online, is Fox. And I'm not even saying that they're correct because they're still a news channel, but they do the other channels like all the other CBS and all those. It's amazing the difference on what they talk about. And one of the things that was talked about for a very long time was the mad escape from New York.
Mm.
How many people are trying to get out of New York, especially with all the immigrants problems. They're like, I know people that live in New York and they tell me their kids can't go to school for a week at a time because when it got really cold, 20 degrees Fahrenheit, right?
Yeah.
They shut the schools to put the immigrants in there because they needed to keep them warm so they wouldn't die.
Yeah.
So the kids couldn't go to school, So, I mean, it made mass. Anyways, when that was happening, so somebody sells a property in New York that's, an average property is $800,000, we'll say.
Sure.
Right? They come to Connecticut and the property here is $350,000. They're like, well, I'll pay you $400.
Yeah.
Just to get it because there was no properties. And what else could you do? And they're selling an $800,000 piece of property and probably making, all that money or a majority of that money,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they come here and they overpay, right?
Yeah, and they got a house that's as good, if not better, for less. So It's a bonus for them. They get the house and they have a bunch of money left over, and then they're in glorious Connecticut.
Mm. Yeah. So what happens is now, so 40% of the market is not being done through the realtor.
Yep.
So now the realtor starts spatting or saying or talking about how there's no houses.
Well, there's no houses for them.
The market's all dried up, right? And they come up with this whole story about how construction in the 50s and the 60s wasn't enough and it didn't match population. And just what you just said, when the truth of the matter is their business is fading in front of them and they don't even know it because 40% of the transactions are being done without them. And that means that's 40% of the market is not being put on the MLS. Yep. And the only reason why people use the MLS is because where else are you going to go find houses for sale? And of course, all the websites like Zillow and Avail and Apartments.com, all these sites that are now becoming very popular were not around.
Yep.
So the MLS was the place to go because the internet was not as popular as it is nowadays. And then COVID spiked all that.
So,
right?
so you're saying you can't go to Home Depot to buy a house, but you can go online and buy a house.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. So all of this causes supply and demand cycle to kick into overdrive. Right. So the realtor doesn't have these houses on the MLS, but the internet does. Mm. So that means the common folk can cut out the realtor, because really, what does the realtor do? I mean, this is dangerous saying this because I hear this from my lawyers all the time. You ought to hear what lawyers say about realtors behind the scenes.
Really?
They would faint if they heard how they were spoke about, right? But so Chris says, what if the seller or buyer is already working with a realtor? Do they have a... No. Yeah, well, they have to terminate a deal, but we don't usually, if they already have a contract, they're under contract with a realtor, we don't usually mess with those deals. I'm just talking in general. So Chris, if they have a contract and we call them and say, you want to sell the house, and they're already under a listing agreement, I tend to walk away. Mm-hmm. Occasionally, they'll be like, well, it's my sister. She was just doing me a favor. Okay, will she release it? Yes, she'll release it. Problem with that is that the sister will be willing to release it, but the broker may not be. So you got to be careful of that, because they usually work for a broker. Yeah. Yep. All right. So this whole cycle that I'm talking about causes a supply and demand issue, right? Which simply means that the lower the supply, the higher the demand. Yep. Right. Mm. So. That's what we're talking about. So I guess, you tell me, Peter, because I don't know, and we have people here. Maybe you can tell me on the chat. What? Why would a seller want to give a wholesaler a discount? Why would he want to do that? Unless you find that one needle in a haystack, mm-hmm. where you just happen to get the person on the phone, or you contacted them. And I have to tell you, because I'm in 3 coaching groups, and 2 of them I own, and 1 I do a friend. 2 of them, with my own coaching, Creative REI Replay, and I coach for another guy, right? Mm-hmm. So, or with another guy, and I can't tell you how many times I've had people come through my coaching system. It's been at least a handful, if not more. I don't even know how to count. That are wholesalers. Mm-hmm. And when you get behind the scenes of what wholesalers do, it is incredible. I mean, they, like one guy, Brad and his brother, mm-hmm. They were buying 7 or 8 houses a month. But the reason why they were buying 7 or 8 houses a month wholesale is because, number one, the one brother was just in charge of lists. They would buy 10,000, 30,000, 50,000 names at a time. They had 10 virtual assistants on the phones, 8 hours a day, calling people and trying to get somebody not to hang up on them. Phew. Okay? And then on the other end, they were actually doing business. They were not doing business with BlackRock, which is a wholesale, they buy a lot of properties, but somebody that was similar to that. So what he did is he reverse engineered how they purchased. So he started making his offers that way. And that's how he was doing it, because he had 2 or 3 of these major buyers that were looking. Of course, he was in Texas, so that made a big difference. But he had these major buyers, and he figured out what they wanted, and he just reversed. So he was just, all he really was the scout. He wasn't a wholesaler. He was the scout. Yeah. He was out looking for deals, finding deals, and they were paying him. Some deals he made $80,000, $100,000 on. Wow. Because he knew what their formula was. And they were a big, New York-based stock market, type of thing. And they just followed their formula. They weren't looking for deals. They knew their formula worked, and that's all they care about. Right? Wow. Crazy. So, again, quite frank, and by the way, I don't know how he's doing. I haven't talked to him in a year or a year.
I was going to say, are they still okay with all that? With the scene right now? Could be different.
So, quite frankly, I'm not sure why a seller would discount a property that much to let a wholesaler profit big, other than And other than they're like these wholesalers that I'm talking about, they got to have 50,000 names and 10 virtual assistants, and I got to tell you the behind the scenes, managing the list. Because if you buy 5 lists at 10,000 names, how do you know that one name isn't on there five times on each list?
Yeah.
Right. So they're stacking lists and all this software. Oh my God, it was incredible how much work these guys put into doing these deals.
No wonder people get so many phone calls to their homes, to their phone spots, selling their houses. People like just 2 guys doing that. Imagine a few guys here and there with all those lists.
So I would imagine you're looking for the needle in the haystack. So there's reasons for people to do this, because there are people like my buddy that I'm talking about that I was coaching, right? There are reasons, but the further we go into time, the less those reasons are. I mean, this is kind of a weird analogy, and I'm not gonna go off on a tangent here, but this is how it is in my head. I read a book one time on economics.
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 Oh.
I say it different.
Oh, I thought it was some new thing. Economics. Okay.
No, economics. It's just the way I'm saying.
Okay.
Economics, right? So, the guy had I think his name is Pfizer. He worked for the big money guy. Oh my God.
Warren Buffett.
No, he worked for the guy that worked for the government. Anyways, he was an economic guy for the government for a long time. Anyway, so bad memory.
He worked for Milton Fried.
No.
All right, I give up.
Who was before him?
I don't remember. I got.
Anyways,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that he brought up a very valuable point. He had a formula on economics.
Mm-hmm.
So he gave the example of it's raw materials times, I forgot what the formula. I should read that book again. Raw materials times ingenuity. Anyways, it was like so what his point was is that you invent things to make things easier.
Yeah, you get some raw materials, you do something clever with it to make a good product that makes life easier for people, and you deliver it somehow.
So the answer, the point that I'm trying to bring up here, which is really, I shouldn't be doing this because I'm wasting time. Like gasoline, like they said they had, 70 years of fossil fuel left.
Yeah.
Right? That's when there was a carburetor on a car.
Oh.
So what happens is this technology came along. That's what I'm trying to think of. So it's raw materials plus technology equals, an economy, right? Mm-hmm. So the technology comes along and we invent a fuel injector. So now instead of a car getting 6 miles to the gallon, it now gets 16 miles to the gallon.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of having 70 years of fossil fuel left, now it turns into 170 years of fossil fuel left because we got efficient with what we were using.
Right.
Okay? Mm-hmm. So in a weird way, this is how my mind is, right? This is how real estate is. This is in which, by the way, he talked about the guy that made the carburetor was out of a job. Mm. But if you looked at it, it recycled, and sooner or later there were more jobs with the injectors because we would make more cars and we would be able to do more because technology would expand. Mm-hmm. So even though it looked like the guy with the carburetor lost his job, there were more job opportunities once the injector caught on and the fuel mileage went up because now it's not 16 miles to the gallon, now it's 26 miles to the gallon.
Sure.
Right? Because technology keeps getting better. So basically, our whole life is like that, right? Because, and his prediction was, by the way, that in the early 1900s it was raw material. People made all their monies and their millions off of raw material. And then when we got to the middle like 1950s and 60s, it was all about production. So the millionaires were made with production, like producing things, right? That's where it was, building factories, production, all the blue collar workers. He said in the 2000s, the next generation, which is now, was going to be distribution.
Sure.
So you think about that, the Amazons and the Walmarts of the world, those are all distribution. The ones that make all the wealth right now are able, because the production is so tuned up, and technology came in and made it easier. Mm-hmm. It used to be you went to Macy's to buy a dress for your wife and it was $100. Now you go buy that same dress on Amazon for $10. because production and technology made production easier and easier. The reason why I'm babbling about this is because this is where we are right now in my mind with real estate. So the carburetor no longer works, which is the realtor. It's old, it's clanky, it doesn't get the mileage it used to, and now something new has come along, and that something new is the internet. But there is going to be something that fills that gap, like the injector, where technology will just take over, right? And it will just make it more efficient or proficient, right? So that's why I talk about this so much, and I know that I'm kind of babbling, but this is where my head is at, like, oh my God, we're at that stage where we're going from a carburetor to a fuel injector, and the efficiency and the ability to do a closing is getting faster and faster. The amount of people that need to be involved in the closing is becoming less and less, right? So we talked about in the and I know I'm way off here. I'm going to get back to what you should be doing, and I promise you I'm going to land this podcast in your lap like, oh my God, you're going to be like incredible, right? So what's happening is, yeah, that's right. John just said, you're 100% right, John.
AI is the new real estate agent.
Yeah. Actually, I saw on the news the other day that they're talking about, Bernie Sanders, or maybe it was this morning, Bernie Sanders is trying to get a 4-hour work week. So one of the newscasters said, yeah, well, yeah, Chris says that's a great analogy. So, one of the newscasters said, well, yeah, of course we can go to AIs. Go to 4-hour work weeks. 4-day work weeks. Just use AI. So, anyways, all this is, we're in the middle of all this and we don't see it. Like when we were in the middle of, if anybody lived and knows anything about cars, the stupid thing about cars is that we injected, actually in Connecticut, they injected the Bosch fuel injector system. And the guy went to try to sell it to the manufacturers, the big three, and the big three, meaning Chevy, Ford, and Chrysler, they poo-pooed him like, no. So he went to Europe and sold to Europe, and that's where the fuel injector started, was in Europe, because United States people wouldn't buy it.
Really?
That's where we are with real estate. Yeah, that's where we are with real estate, because we have ways to doing it now. But the big guys, meaning NAR, National Association of Realtors, and those type of people aren't looking at it because they have too much money to make. Because it's not just NAR, it's the bankers, it's the closing agents and attorneys.
The appraisers,
right?
inspectors.
The appraisers, that's right, the inspectors, the insurance guys.
Title guys.
They're all in cahoots, right? To do these transactions because they're all fee-based businesses.
Yeah.
And if you do a transaction without the realtor or without any of that, right, you say, as we talk about all the time, we save 12 to 15% in closing costs. Right? We talk about that all the time.
Sure.
But it's more prevalent now, just like going from the carburetor to the fuel injector. When you're in the middle, so while Europe was producing, fuel injectors, America was doing, these other weird things with carburetors. They're trying to turn the carburetor into the fuel injector and eventually just succumb to just putting in fuel injectors. Because, the Japanese were doing it and the Germans were doing it, and all these other car manufacturers, and they just had to follow, right? I'm done now. I'm sorry I wasted the last 7 minutes of your life. But the point is that's exactly where we are with real estate. So it brings me back to, why would someone want to do a wholesale deal and use a carburetor? Why would they want to do that?
Or to me, what I got from what you said, hope this doesn't screw up doesn't reveal the rest of your pot. Why would you work with a realtor and have to pay 12, 15% out of your profits when you can do something else and make a lot more money? Because we're the injectors and we make more money even for the sellers when they do it with our creative financing. Why would they do that? Well, the true lie on the line is people think that a realtor is used as a consultant to help them hold their hand and walk through the deal. The truth is the only purpose of a realtor is to find a house, to find a deal. Yeah, bring the buyer.
Yeah, right? So other than that, your closing agent is the one that's supposed to help you walk through the deal. Either your attorney or your closing agent are the ones that are supposed to walk, because they're getting paid more. They're getting paid too. And that's been the conflict all along. is because the realtor gets the most skin in the game, 5 or 6%, which is a lot of dough. Where the closing agent gets, $500, $800, $1,000, even $2,000 in some places, right? Mm-hmm. It's not what the realtor's getting, $15,000 or $20,000 or $25,000, depending on the price of the house, right? So there's always been that turmoil there. But more importantly, if you can go on the internet, like with Zillow, and find your own house.
Yeah. You see the house is right there. Why ask?
Why would you need a realtor, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. So this is the reason why we talk about doing, and this is nothing new if you've been around for a while. I skipped the whole page. So what do? Well, our solution is we swell the seller's Greek glands, because that's what the economy's doing, right? So we're following the economy, because the economy is swelling the seller's Greek glands. Between NAR having owned all these websites and inflating the price, and the bank saying, yeah, we'll change our appraisal, we'll lend that money, and they inflate the price. Now all of a sudden there's comps, right? Because it's all everybody's making more money, because the realtor makes more commission, the banker, he lends more money, so that's more interest, right?
Sure.
So everybody's making more. The big guys are making more money, the ones that are controlling the whole thing, right? So what do we have to do to overcome that?
We have to outdo them somehow.
Right. Which is what the Grand Slam offer is that we talk about. Excuse me, which, by the way, there's a link inside of your description, so you can go get what we're about to talk about for the next 20 minutes. So my solution is we need to swell the seller's Greek glands too. Right? They're doing it.
Yeah.
So we should do it.
Well, they're asking for, homeowners, home sellers are asking for a lot of money. I had a guy come through the system the other day. It was like, our texts go out and responses come in. The guy wants, send a $2 million contract to my lawyer and we'll talk. I look up the house. I don't care if it's the fancy town next that I grew up with. It was a $450,000 house, 1,800 square feet. It was nice, but $2 million? I didn't even answer the guy. I just deleted him because that's a jerk. $2 million.
Oh, see, I would have to have fun with that guy.
Well,
I'd say instead of sending you an offer, I'd rather send you a lottery ticket, because you got a better chance of hitting the lottery than me paying $2 million.
Well, I could think of a lot of nice things to say, but I didn't want to say anything to this guy. But that's how bad it is. Like the sellers even are like, "Give me $2 million." It's like, yeah, okay, sure. Like your God's gift to the earth, right? Chris says, my bad experience with my realtor is the reason why I started looking into and studying real estate. I found my house. My realtor only got me in the house. Okay.
Good job. And here he is. Yeah. All right, so now usually what we're about to talk about, we do this with pretty houses just because. We're taking the least path of resistance. Now, you could do this with anything, right? God, you could do this with a car if you want. You could do this at the grocery store if they let you get away with it, right? In fact, lately, and this is, when I say lately, I'm saying since around COVID, a little bit before COVID, right? We don't, meaning Peter and I, don't even fix them up. Which, by the way, I want to confess very hard here. Our buying habits have not been what they used to be. We buy a lot less houses than I used to. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because of the inflation. Right?
Yep.
So why do that? I mean, Peter doesn't, but I have a pretty good portfolio. It's not a big portfolio because I cleaned it out. I sold a bunch of stuff. And what I did is, instead of trying to go buy new houses to make more money, I paid down a bunch of mortgages. So I have less houses, less liability, less problems, less work, and I make the same amount of money, if not more. Mm-hmm. Right? So it worked out pretty good. So the point that I want to make here, the last thing I want to say before I go over some numbers, we're going to do these quick because we've done these before. So I want to go over a deal. So the last thing I want to say is so if my sister, who lives in Fort Myers, Florida, told me the other day that real estate's dead in Cape Coral. Now, Cape Coral is the highest market that I've seen around the country for a couple of years. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
In terms of prices?
She goes, yeah. Well, I have friends that have houses in the market for 3 and 4 months and they can't even get an offer. But then she said, but my friend also has a 900 or 1,000 square foot house or 1,100 square foot house that has a nice lanai and swimming pool in the back and on the canal and all that kind of stuff. She said she paid $180,000 for it and she's now asking $400,000.
Yep.
So now what happens is we have a bunch of non-investors becoming investors, thinking that they're smart because they're making money, when in truth the market is making money for them. Right? They're not making the money; the market is because of inflation. All right, so let's take a house that's worth $420,000,
Mm-hmm.
but they owe $410,000.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The payment on the house, which is principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, is $2,817.64, $2,817.64. Right?
Sure.
So if this seller were to sell this house with a realtor or on the market, even on his own, for sale by owner, he would need 10%. Is if he sells on his own, he's going to need 10% closing costs. That's $42,000.
Sure.
If he used a realtor, it would be 15%, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that would be $63,000.
He's only got 10,000 equity.
And he's got barely 10,000 equity. See, a lot of people don't realize that when they sell a house, the first 10 or 15% is the cost of closing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not their profit.
Mm-hmm.
They think, oh, well, I just got to pay the realtor 5%, and 5% of 400,000 is $20,000. No, it's not true.
It still wouldn't work.
Right. So, remember, a lot of houses in COVID were overpaid. So this is a normal scenario. Right? Because how many people during COVID paid $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 over asking price? Remember?
Sure.
That was happening for 2 years?
Sure.
Well, now it's coming back around to bite them in the ass, because now what's happening is they have a situation in their life, new job, transfer, divorce, I don't know, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The situation, we talk about that a million times before, and now all of a sudden they got to sell the house, and they can't because they're over leveraged. Because they paid too much for the house, or they got to lose money.
Yep.
Right? We went through this with a deal we were just doing with a girl because she's going to lose $80,000.
Mm-hmm.
Right? She's going to lose $80,000. And I showed her how she didn't have to do that. Now we come along, and this house is worth $420,000. They owe $410,000. We come along and say to them, if you're willing to do a delayed cash out, or in other words, wait 3 years to get your money, and we take responsibility for the house, no landlording for you, nothing like that, you just become the bank, we can give you $604,453. Right? Now, this is exactly what I'm talking about. We swell their Greek glands, right?
Yeah.
Does that work?
Well, that's a lot more than they thought they were getting.
See, what happens is if they were to sell it for cash, they would probably get about $357,000. And that's a long way from $410,000.
Mm-hmm. They have to pay for the privilege of selling their own house. That's never a good scenario. So in that case, if we get them to break even, we'd save them $30,000 at minimum.
Right.
But with the delayed cash out, they actually make money in the long run.
Right. So obviously, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to save them the $42,000 or $63,000. $42,000 if they sell on their own, $63,000 if they use a realtor, right? Mm-hmm. So we're going to save them that money. So we'll say $42,000 or $63,000, whatever number you want to use, right? So we save them that money. Then what we're going to do is, because of what we're going to do is, we're going to actually sign a lease option with the seller, and we're going to wholesale it. Which I hate to use that word. I'd like to change that word one of these days, but we're going to actually go find a buyer that is willing to buy it from us. We're going to actually assign it. That's what we're going to do. We're going to assign it to a buyer, right? And we're going to make a fee for doing that. So we're going to give the seller a $100 option consideration deposit, a non-refundable option consideration deposit of $100, and it could be $1, $10, $20, whatever you want to use. We use $100. So we're going to buy the option agreement for $100. We're going to go find our buyer to give us $10,000 or $20,000 or whatever we can get for that option agreement to assign it to them. Because where are they going to find that deal? Realtors don't do that. There's no website that does this, right? They have to know one of us or see one of our ads to be able to do that, right? And there's a lot less sellers that want to do this than buyers. I would venture to say for every buyer that's willing to take monthly payments, there's probably 100 or 2 sellers that want to do that.
Wait, say it again. You mean the other way around?
Yeah, I don't know what I said, so I'll say it again.
Yeah.
For every seller that's willing to take payments, there's probably 100 or 2 buyers that want to do that.
Well, it's a great deal for a buyer.
Right.
They're looking to rent, and instead of renting, they find they can rent for a while, quote, and then buy the house. And, they're secure in that. They have paperwork that secures that for them if they want.
Right.
But they don't have to. So it's good for them.
So I got something new that I've been doing recently that you may not have picked up on.
Mm-hmm.
So how much do you get for the monthly rent? I get a lot of this. And I use the mortgaged amount.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people use Rentometer. That's a big mistake. But I have a new way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's called, and it's this. I didn't make this up. I was on this other coaching call with Joe, and he talked about it, and it just clicked for me, right?
Yeah.
So use the 1% rule.
All right. I've heard that.
Right? So the 1% rule means if it's worth $420 or we're selling for $420, that means we can get $4,200 a month for rent. Now, if they were to go get a mortgage, right, it would not be far from that. They'd probably pay $3,700, $3,800, principal, taxes, insurance. Because here's what happens, right? The seller's interest rate on the $2,779, we'll just round up the number. At $2,779, the seller's interest rate is probably 4%.
Yeah, because when he bought it,
If they go get a mortgage now, it'd be around that $4,000 mark.
yeah, he's paying 7-8%.
So here's what happens: if you use the 1% rule and you charge $4,200 for the lease for the seller, remember you're going to go in this deal and get out.
Yeah.
You're not staying in this deal.
Yeah.
Right. You're just doing you're a matchmaker. You're just doing the transaction for them. You're in and out, and you make your money. Which is why you could do these within 30 days if you know how to do this. Which, by the way, if you've rented from a landlord in the past, you know 90% of this. Okay?
Yeah, filling out a lease.
Right, exactly. So that means if we're getting $4,200 and we're getting the seller $4,200 and the seller's mortgage is only $2,779, that means the seller is profiting $1,428 per month.
Sure. Just on the cash flow.
Okay? So not only are they going to lose money on the deal, now they're getting cash flow. So they're taking this deal that they were trying to get all cash for and trying to use it through the realtor system, and they were going to blow $63,000. Now, all of a sudden, they saved the $63,000, and now they're making $1,428 a month. Oh, yeah, by the way, over the course of 3 years, that's $51,155. So now they went from losing $63,000 to making $51,000 over the course of 3 years. But it gets better than that, right? Because every time the buyer pays the seller, it's a lease. There is no principal reduction. So that means when the seller gets the $4,200, he's going to make his mortgage payment of $2,779. In that $2,779, there's going to be an interest principal reduction. So each payment out of the $2,779, there's going to be some principal reduction, some interest. Right? Now, I took a very conservative number only after 12 months, which is mostly interest, not principal.
Right.
Right? If they're in their mortgage 10 years, then they're going to get a lot more principal reduction than interest because all the interest on the loan comes out in the first 5 years. Right? So on this particular deal, right, at a 12, and it could be more. I made this number because it just, I don't have the statement, the actual mortgage statement in front of me. Is $7,622 a year. So that means
a month.
The sellers make
a month. 700 something a month?
No, $7,622 a year.
Okay.
Yeah. So that means the seller over the course of 3 years just made another $22,866.
Yeah.
So they got the $55,155 for the cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
Now they got an additional $22,866 because when they go to pay off the mortgage in 3 years from now, it's going to be $22,000 less money than what it is now.
That's right. That money. So that money's in the house. So some money's in his pocket, some is in his house, but it's there. He'll get it now. He'll get it later.
So that means that the seller will pocket $22,000 when the buyer cashes them out for the $420,000.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Now we haven't inflated the house, or we haven't done any of the money now, money monthly, money later things. That's a whole nother story. Because we're not going to sell for $420. We're probably going to sell for $430 or $440.
Yeah.
Right. So there's another profit center there. But this is just for the seller. This is not for us. Right. Now, because the seller's not living in the house, right? Because they're not there, the seller can actually apply
depreciation.
Thank you. Depreciation number. So when he does his taxes, or she does her taxes, at the end of the year, because they're not living in the house, they can apply appreciation. So the depreciation is 27.5% over. Did I say that right?
Well, 27.5 years.
Yeah, of depreciation. That's what it is.
So it comes
which
to...
means 3.64% a year.
Right. Off the price of the house.
Based on your income, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So in this particular case, you're going to get a tax deduction of $9,631.
Mm-hmm.
So that means if you make $100,000 a year, you just got a $10,000. Now you're only paying taxes on $90,000. Because you took the $10,000 off because you got depreciation. The government allows you to do that. So you just saved taxes of $9,000 a year. So if you got a W-2 form and it shows you made $100,000, the government took taxes out not knowing you own this piece of property, and you're going to get a refund back for $10,000 because you got the depreciation, because you already paid your taxes in your W-2 form, right? So now you're going to get your refund back for $10,000. Okay? So, I'm sorry, I did that wrong. It's $3,210 a year. So you're going to get $3,200 back per year, and it's $9,631 over the course of 3 years.
Okay.
So it's $10,000 over the course of 3 years.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, when we write the option agreement, what happens is we're going to add in the option agreement 0.25% for inflation. Appreciation.
Right, because the price of the house will go up usually.
So they pay their first month's rent. Month 2, the house is worth 0.25% more than it was before. That equates to 3% money. So that means the value of the house is going to go up 3% per year. Okay? So that's $12,600 per year. I'm sorry. Per year. So the first year, the house is not worth $420,000. It's worth $420,000 plus $12,600. Okay.
Yeah, well, that's important. I've talked to people like owners, sellers, who say, "Well, what if my house goes up in value? Then I'm going to sell for this original prices." No, we built into the paperwork that if the longer the person stays, well, what if the person stays a long time? You make more money. What if the price of the value of the house goes up? The contract says you get more money if the guy sits there. So, okay, I mean, every objection is covered with solving it because it's realistic. The price should go up.
Right. Time equals money. So, that $12,600 over the course of 3 years is $37,800. So now if we add all these numbers up, we're going to buzz through this because we're about at the end of the podcast. Now, if we add all these numbers up, if they wait 3 years, in other words, I said in the beginning of the podcast, a delayed cash out. In other words, they delay their cash out to 3 years from now, which they should never cash out, to be honest with you. But they're going to make, if you add all those numbers up I just told you, they're going to make $184,453. Now, the realtor can't do that. For sale by owner can't do that. Who else is going to take them from a house that is worth $420 and they owe $410 and they're going to lose $63,000 to making $184,453.
I don't know, Bill. Sounds like a scam to me.
Yeah. So if you take the 184,453 and add the original 420, that's what puts you at the 604,453.
Yep.
So the house is worth 604 to them. Right?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, if you go in the description of this podcast, the link that's there will get you the scripts and the calculators and all that kind of stuff. It's there. Okay? Because I know I'm just kind of babbling off. For me, and I'm not being arrogant or trying to be smarter than you or I just do numbers all day long. This is what I do. I have coaching clients. I do them for myself. After a while, when you do these numbers, you'll talk like I will. Right.
And it took us a while to get here because we've been doing these kind of deals. It's a slot deal, sandwich, lease, option, transfer that we don't stay in. But we've been doing those for years. But when do you actually sit down, back up, take a long distance view of all the details, how all the numbers fall? It doesn't happen when you turn this over in 30 days. It happens when you go to your accountant at the end of the year and you talk to your lawyer, you do all the math, you go, what happened? And you see the profit that happens. Like when we own the houses and keep them ourselves, how it works out. So this is like years of experience, and you put all the pieces together. Gee, it's right in front of us. But you put it all together at once, and you see the number, how big it is. You don't see that individually, inch by inch, or just the cash flow. Oh, I don't want $1,300 a month. It's more.
So here's the thing. I leave out a very, very important number because I can't mathematically figure it out for each person.
What's that?
And the number is the interest you pay on your loan is completely deductible. So in February, I get statements from my banks. Like one just came in. I paid $7,983 last year on a subject to deal. I paid $7,983 because the deed's in my name.
Yeah.
And taxes. So I take that $7,983 and it's a deductible for me.
That's true.
Your seller will also have more money on top of that. They'll have another, they'll probably have another 30 or 40 grand on top of that. But I can't calculate that properly unless I know what their mortgage balance is or their mortgage statement and how much interest they're paying. So I could make up some mock examples, but the point is that they're also going to get their the interest deduction.
It's true. We do that on
so it's
our house.
More than the $604,000, right?
And I just saw.
Right, so now
I just saw our account.
We got to go
yesterday.
quick because we're at 1:02. We're at 2 minutes past the hour. So go quickly because I still have more.
I just saw our accountant yesterday. It was a good trip. It works out really well when you have these deductions and all that stuff. I would have asked him that if I'd known. We'll see.
Yeah.
Figure a formula for that.
All right. So $604,453 is for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
If they wanted to wait 5 years, I'm going to rattle these numbers off because we got to go. All right, cost to sell is $63,000. Cash flow then goes to $85,258. Mortgage pay down goes to $38,111. Depreciation goes to $16,052, and appreciation goes to $63,000.
Jeez.
That gives a grand total of $265,422 profit. $265,000 for waiting 5 years instead of losing $63,000. Yeah, so Fred is asking, so this is something you got to talk to your accountant because every state is different. So Fred is saying, would the seller have to pay capital gains tax on the cash out because they lived in the house prior to selling it for a lease option? So I think after the 3 years, that doesn't matter, but every state is different.
Mm.
So because they leased it for 3 years, if the seller cashes out for 3 years, I think most states are 1 year. If you don't live in it 1 year, you don't have to do that.
That sounds familiar.
Okay? But
check with the accountant. Yep.
Yeah, check with your accountant. All right. So because they waited 5 years, they made $265,000, which now means they're selling the house for $685,000, not $420,000.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Or $357,000. Compared to.
If they sold
Compared
right
to.
now, they would get $357,000.
Yep.
Right? I didn't do that math. So 685 minus 357. That means they're making $328,000 more money by waiting 5 years. Because you take 685 minus 357.
You're not double counting. Well, you do have the closing costs in there, the savings for the first year. So you're not double counting it that way.
You're right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm just saying to compare to the guy, to thinking like you make this instead of that, just as in conversation with the person.
Now, if you're telling the seller you can make them $247,000 in 3 years, or $328,000 in 5 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the punchline for today's podcast. You got a $100 deposit. I'm sorry, you paid your seller $100 for an option agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And you make about 40 grand to do this deal. Up front, within 30 days. Because what you're going to do is you're going to ask your buyer to give you 10% down. You might take 5% in cash and 5% overpayments, but you're going to get 10% down.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you get 5% down, right?
Yeah.
Even if you just got that, even if you got 3%, which is foolish, 420,000 times 5% is 21,000. 420,000 times 3% is 12,000.
Not terrible.
So the worst case scenario is if you're bashful about money, you're going to only ask 3% and you're going to get $12,000 for doing this deal. Oh yeah, by the way, did you need to have all the virtual assistants and buy the 50,000 names on a list?
No, thank you.
I guarantee you, if you were to walk your dog around the neighborhood that you live in and started talking to people, you're going to find out there's at least 1 or 2 people in your neighborhood that overpaid for a property that want to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
Chris says that's not a bad return. Mine went better. You're right, Chris.
Well,
it's not a bad return.
Obviously, the big difference is houses used to be 200,000, 175,000. It's so the houses are double what they used to be. So our percentages also double, without having to screw people with double dipping, buyer, seller, agent fees, NAR, nasty. Over.
The point is that we are, meaning you and I, and in this podcast, and if you're listening to us, you should be too, are moving with the times. We're going from the carburetor to the fuel injector. We're in that transition right now. And I get very passionate about this because it's like there is no better time to understand creative real estate than right now. Because we are in the infantry stage of creative real estate. Because there's enough of us around that the sellers actually know what is a subject to deal. Right? I was on a coaching call the other day. I'm going to say this, and then we're done. I was on a coaching call the other day, and there's a girl that bought out that did exactly what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The seller was behind on payments. Right? She owed whatever. Right? It was a $550,000 house. She went onto Facebook and put in there, I got a subject to deal. And she sold it to someone who's going to live in it, that, by the way, is a wholesaler, and made $55,000. 21 days later. Or 19 days later or something like that. She collected $85,000 down from him. $15,000 went to the bank for past payments. $15,000 went to the seller. $5,000 went to closing, and $5,500 went to her. I'm sorry, $55,000 went to her.
Sweet deal.
You know why? You know why? Because she got off her ass and she went and found the deal. And that's the trick. Get all the considerations out of your head and just go talk to people. Use there's a script and there's everything in the description of this podcast. You can go get it, go watch the video, go do what you got to do. The script and everything is there. Just go do it. The only reason why you're not making money is not because you don't have enough skill. You don't need massive skill. You need massive action. That's what you need. Mm-hmm. Okay, off my soapbox. Have a very good week. Thank you guys for being here and asking all the questions. Thank you very much for following us. Some of you do it weekly. Thank you for your support. Don't forget to subscribe to us. Don't forget to leave us a review. Don't forget to like us. And of course, if you have any questions, you know where to go. Okay? Have a great week. Flourish and prosper. Thanks again. Over and out.
Thanks for tuning in to the hottest real estate topics on the planet with Bill and Pete. If you want to continue learning how to buy and sell real estate without money or credit, head over to flippinghouses.club for some cutting-edge real estate wealth tools. Or contact us at info@flippinghouses.club.